Manhattan in winter. The icy wind sweeps through the city's streets, hitting passers-by who pull their coats tighter against their bodies, desperate to protect themselves from the bite of the air. The snow falls in discreet flakes, slowly covering the sidewalks with its cold and silent veil. Donald Trump walks alone, without the usual protection of his motorcade. He feels drawn by an inexplicable need to blend into the city, to observe its pulse, to hear the whispers of those around him. A man of power, accustomed to carefully planned trips, today chooses to face the cold with the anonymity of crowds. He wants to see the city as it is, without filters, without screens, without distance. His gaze scans the bustling streets, scanning the hurried faces, the closed gazes, when he suddenly stops. In a dark, almost deserted alley, a man can barely seem to stand. He is dressed in an old, worn military jacket, his eyes marked by fatigue and resignation. His features are drawn, his face emaciated by the cold and the harshness of life. He rests against a cold stone wall, his shoulders hunched, as if the weight of the world were pressing down on him. At his feet, a faded cardboard sign. Veteran in distress. Trump freezes, his eyes locked on the man's. He feels a strange connection, an irrepressible impulse, as if something in this man's gaze resonates with his own consciousness. A shiver runs through his body, much deeper than just the winter breeze that bites his cheeks. There is a truth in this man's eyes, a truth he cannot ignore. Without hesitation, he discreetly signals his guards to step back, ordering them to take a few steps away. He wants to be alone, alone with this moment, alone with this man. Trump walks slowly, his boots hitting the deserted pavement of the alley. Each step feels heavy, as if the air itself is reluctant to move. The crunch of his footsteps resonates in the silent atmosphere, a strange music that echoes the solitude of the place. The man, who seems to have just noticed her presence, looks up. Their encounter is electric, their eyes meeting in a suspended moment. "Who are you?" the man asks in a hoarse, almost unintelligible voice. His eyes are hard, defiant, but there is also a glint of curiosity in his gaze. Trump, without responding immediately, bends down slowly, his gestures calculated, but respectful. He wants to understand, to feel this situation, this encounter, in all its complexity. He extends his hand with a calm, almost solemn gesture, without haste or pride. "What's your name?" Trump asks, his voice steady, without arrogance, a bridge stretched between two radically different worlds. He is no longer the billionaire surrounded by journalists and cameras, but a man who is looking for something that he himself does not understand. The man hesitates for a moment. His eyes scrutinize the outstretched hand, as if he were trying to decode its intentions, to understand its meaning. A heavy silence settles between them, a palpable tension. Finally, after a long time, he accepts the handshake, slowly but firmly, as if making an important decision. "Jack Miller," he said hoarsely, his tone marked by years of isolation and suffering. "Former Marine." Trump repeats the name, as if he wants to ingrain it in his memory, as if he knows he won't be able to forget this moment. "Jack, you've been through a lot, I assume." Jack lets out a bitter, almost inaudible laugh. He closes his eyes for a moment, as if reliving painful memories, fragments of his past that appear without warning. "More than I would like to remember, sir. But everyone has their cross to bear." His voice is hard, but there is also a kind of resignation in his words, an exhaustion that seems to have survived the years and the trials. The two men exchange a few words, a short dialogue, almost disembodied, but full of meaning. Trump learns that Jack served in an elite unit, Bravo Company, in the heart of the fiercest battles in Afghanistan. Jack speaks of his brothers in arms with suppressed emotion, but his eyes sometimes get lost, distant, as if the memories of the battlefield still haunt him. He describes the intense battles, the perilous missions, the comrades who fell alongside, a bit like shadows in his mind. Their sacrifice, their lives shattered by years of war. But it is the invisible wounds, those of the soul, those that no one sees and that no one wants to see, which occupy the majority of his thoughts. We were sent there, sir, to defend a country, but what we forget is that we come back with ghosts. You can mend a broken leg, but you can't mend a broken spirit. Jack's voice is soft but filled with a deep bitterness, a silent poison that runs through his words. I'm not the only one. Many of us have returned, abandoned here, to live in oblivion. The war tears us apart, then we are thrown away like trash, as if what we had given didn't count. Trump, hands buried in his coat pockets, listens silently, as if absorbed by the truth in this man's words. Each word seems to hit harder than the last, a bitter reminder of how much he ignores about the reality of many Americans. Jack talks about the lack of support, the broken promises, the hidden wounds, and the months, years spent battling invisible demons. Society, according to him, has forgotten them, and the city, this great noisy and implacable machine, has swallowed them up in its anonymity. Trump feels destabilized. In his world, everything seems to be able to be resolved through agreements, gestures of power, but there, faced with this man, he becomes aware of the inadequacy of all that. He sees, for the first time, the fine line that separates his world from Jack's world, and he feels a frustration that he cannot assuage. A discomfort. A void. After a moment of reflection, while the icy wind almost cuts them off, Trump leans a little closer, a gesture which, for him, marks a desire to understand. You've done a lot for this country. But you don't have to be here, on this street, with this sign, he said, his voice slightly trembling although firm. There is a weight in his words that he had not anticipated. A sense of justice, a recognition that he did not always express. You gave of your life. You deserve better. Jack stares at him, his eyes as cold as the concrete beneath his feet. He doesn't let himself be softened by words. The distrust runs deeper than one might imagine. Why should I trust you? He asks, his voice hard, almost defiant. You're not the first to tell me that. I was promised things, a lot of things, and all that was shattered. Promises crumble, sir. Like everything else. Trump takes a moment to respond. The situation confronts him with a truth that he generally prefers to ignore. His gaze fixes on Jack, a more intense gaze this time, less interested in the image he sends to the world and more in the person in front of him. Because I want you and your brothers in arms to be honored, he said finally, his voice firmer, but imbued with a rare, almost unprecedented sincerity. Because you deserve more than what this country has given you. You've done more for it than many people, and you're not supposed to live in the shadows. He pauses, observing the man in front of him, trying to capture his attention, to unravel the years of accumulated suffering. Come with me. There is a better place for you, Jack. You can find a place where you are listened to, where you are more than a number, where you can finally heal. A few days later, Jack finds himself installed in a luxury hotel, taken care of by Trump. The hotel is sumptuous, its walls lined with delicate woodwork and modern paintings, its crystal chandeliers casting shards of light across the room. But it's not just the room or the material comforts that change for Jack. It's much more than that. It's not the warmth of the blanket that matters, nor the softness of the mattress he lies on after years of sleeping on hard surfaces. What really changes for him is a unique opportunity to see his own story in a new light, to have access to a reality he had never imagined. Trump is not only offering him a roof over his head or temporary shelter. What he offers him is a chance to be heard, to reveal the story of Bravo Company to the world. Trump invites him to share his experiences, to make known the sacrifice of those who risk their lives on the ground, but also to talk about what these men and women experience after leaving the battlefields, when all eyes are turned elsewhere and invisible wounds continue to gnaw at them. Trump is not offering him charity, but a project of recognition and visibility. He wants Jack to become the spokesperson for all those who, like him, have returned to a world that did not expect them. A few days after their meeting, a ceremony is organized at the White House in honor of Jack and his comrades in arms. The rays of the winter sun stream in through the large windows of the hall, illuminating the faces of those who have come. Jack, nervous and uncertain, takes the stage, a shiver running down his spine. He has never been comfortable in the spotlight, and here everything seems even grander, more solemn. Around him, his former comrades, other veterans, stand up and greet him respectfully. Some are moved, others resigned, but all share the same respect for the man he has become. Trump, standing slightly aside, looks at him with rare intensity, waiting for the opportune moment. Then he speaks. "What you have done, Jack, and what Bravo Company has accomplished, is more than just a mission," Trump begins, his voice echoing in the great room. "It is an act of pure courage. You faced the impossible, went through trials that would have broken many others, to protect us. But that's not all. You also faced invisible demons after leaving the battlefield, ghosts that many cannot understand." The audience remains silent, hanging on every word. The emotion is palpable, a collective emotion that is not measured in immediate applause, but in this suspended breathing that runs through the entire room. Trump, in a solemn gesture, turns his gaze to Jack, then invites him to join him on stage. "Today we honor a hero," he continues, a slight smile on his lips, but deep sincerity in his voice. "And we are announcing the creation of a support fund for veterans, so that none of you are ever forgotten again." At these words, the room explodes into applause. Thousands of hands are raised, cries of encouragement ring out, and faces light up with new admiration. But for Jack, it's not the ovation that matters. It's not the recognition of others that touches him. What he feels is much more than that. It's respect rediscovered. This moment, this scene, is the recognition he has never had before, the one that had been denied him for years. Emotion tightens his throat. He stands there, his heart beating harder than ever, but his gaze clearer, more fixed. He is no longer this man hidden in the shadows, in the alley, with his sign. He is no longer the one we forget, the one we throw into the dustbin of history. He is now a living symbol of sacrifice and resilience, a testimony that cannot be ignored. His hands tremble slightly as he raises them to greet the crowd, but his gaze is firm. It is not the instant recognition of the public that makes his eyes light up, but the deep feeling that his story, and that of his brothers in arms, have finally found an attentive ear. They were heard. They have been seen. And this, above all, is what transforms it. Not the luxury of the hotel, not the grandeur of the White House, but the moment when he realizes that, from now on, he really exists in the eyes of those around him.